Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you that I don't know, my name is MacBrayne. I'm a Rheumatology Clinical Research Fellow, and I've been attached to the Pambayesian project since October this year, so this is my first meeting here. And my background is a rheumatology registrar, having previously been based at the Arthritis Centre a few years ago. So apologies if I'm covering old ground that you've already done before, but I just thought I'd briefly recap about the disease itself. So rheumatoid arthritis is a relatively common inflammatory disease affecting about 1% of the UK population, with the preponderance of women in middle age. It's quite a heterogeneous collection of clinical syndromes with a variety of different pathotypes, but the characteristic disease process is persistent synovitis, causing a chronic inflammatory arthritis. There's no single diagnostic test or biomarker for the disease, which presents a challenge in terms of monitoring and how we're going to carry out this project. But the main thing is it's a very treatable disease, whereas previously it had been an inevitable decline to immobility and deformity. In the late 90s and early noughties, there was a huge sort of explosion of treatments for rheumatoid arthritis, so going from steroids and synthetic DMARs like methotrexate, suddenly we had a huge amount of drugs coming through the market, biologic drugs which are extremely effective but also very expensive. And with that came the challenge of how to effectively monitor disease, how to make sure that we are reliably, reproducibly assessing disease accurately. And so composite disease activity measures became a huge thing, and the DAS score in particular is the one that is most commonly used. A combination of examination for tender and swollen joint counts, combined with the patient global health score and inflammatory markers. And with the DAS score, as you can see here, you come out with a number, and that is stratified to high, moderate, low disease activity and remission. So what are the challenges of treatment? We have all of these effective drugs. Why isn't it easy now? Rheumatoid arthritis is a relapsing and remitting chronic inflammatory disease. And as you can see here, the red arrows representing your classic clinic schedule at 0, 6 and 12 months. The disease activity doesn't always conveniently coincide with the routine follow-up that we give. So you could just say give them more appointments, and the green arrows would be the optimum time to see the patient, but unfortunately, as with all aspects of the NHS, there's significant demands on service which make that an impossible feat. Other challenges are the risks of immunosuppression, so these drugs work by suppressing the immune system and preventing the erroneous antibody production, but there are side effects such as TB, shingles, and non-melanoma skin cancers. Similarly, cost is an issue. This is a treatment, this is not a cure, so patients are on these drugs for a substantial period of their life. Biologics, the sort of general figure that's bandied around is 10,000 per person per annum, with 12,000 patients on biologic drugs from the rheumatology department at our centre alone, which means that although we're a very small specialty, we spend a lot of money. There is the possibility, in terms of risks of immunosuppression and cost, of tapering these drugs. So whilst we can't reduce the amount necessarily given in each dose, we can spread the interval between, but there's often fear of doing that because patients will not be seen for 6 months, and there's worry that they would flare in that time. So clearly there are needs that remote monitoring may be able to answer the questions of, and this is just a reminder of the ubiquity of smartphones in our culture, with rises, it's not over 95% in younger age groups, and over 50% now even in older ages. So there's an opportunity to deliver frequent disease activity measures, engage patients in their disease management. It's endorsed by the European Society for Rheumatology, and it also has huge potential as a tool in clinical research. Similarly, there's an increasing drive to use technology to support care in all aspects of the NHS. I think it's no news for anyone that our current health secretary is a big fan of using technology to support NHS care, and this is reflected by the NHS long-term plan, which came out this year, which has a whole chapter devoted to digitally enabled care. So there are lots of apps out there, but there are problems. So a systematic review in 2017 found them to be unregulated. So there are 700 apps on the App Store at the time of review that met the search term for arthritis, but only 20 that really met the criteria for review, and only 7 of those had any evidence of physician involvement in the app development whatsoever. There's a dichotomy between apps targeted at patients, which tend to be symptom trackers, which don't need validated disease measures, and physicians who use standard disease activity calculators. The apps weren't secure, and there were no apps that were directly linked with the healthcare provider at that time. So it's a bit of a Wild West situation. So the challenges of remote RA monitoring, as I've touched on before, we have no simple biomarker for disease activity. So we do not have a capillary glucose measure or a pulse rate here. Treat to target monitoring is based on validated composite disease activity measures. So just to remind the non-rheumatologists, these are all of the various validated outcome measures that are approved. Some that are just patient measures called patient-reported outcomes, some that require input from a clinician, and some that also require laboratory inputs. Now, patient-reported outcomes have had a surge of interest with remote monitoring for the simple attraction that they do not require more than patient input. However, there is a slight issue that in the UK, by NICE and by commissioners, we are required to have a documented disease DAS28 score in order to instigate biologic therapy, in order to continue it. So various approaches that have been taken by a variety of academic centres is either using patient-reported outcome measures, the RAPID-3 most commonly, and these are validated and approved by our, both the ACR and the European League Against Rheumatism, but we still can't change therapy based on them. You would still need to bring the patient in for a DAS score, even if you can roughly equate one score to the other. The other issue, as with all of this, is it requires regular and persistent patient data inputs, such as filling in questionnaires, inputting joint counts, and that comes to the issue of engagement and attrition, patient losing interest in the app and not bothering with it anymore. And a classic example is the PARADE study, which is a GlaxoSmithKline study, which was a completely e-recruited study in rheumatology, but they lost pretty much all of their patients by the final week of week 12. The alternative is to use novel measures like accelerometers, which is exciting but unvalidated, and there are some logistical drawbacks to it. For example, any global gait mobility study has had to exclude anyone with mobility comorbidities, including things like osteoarthritis, which is incredibly common in our patients, or patients with Parkinson's disease or stroke. Some studies have looked at hand movement and wrist movement and had to exclude patients. So what are we doing here? So at the Centre of Experimental Medicine and Rheumatology, we have developed a bespoke DAS app. So we have gone by the literature, which shows that patients can reliably self-score their tender and swollen joint counts. And in conjunction with Web Clinical, we have developed the BioT DAS app. And we're currently running a clinical trial, which is a pilot. We're targeting this for patients that are already on injectable biologic drugs who have reasonably well-controlled disease. So we're not targeting patients with severe disease greater than 5.1. Patients submit self-scored tender and swollen joint counts in line with their biologic schedule. So biologic injectables tend to be anywhere from a week to monthly. So every time they inject their drug, they are prompted to input a joint count, and that is combined with their bloods. So they do their inflammatory markers monthly, and we input that data to give them a full DAS score. So we're currently recruiting for the study. We opened at the mid-December. We need 30 patients randomised to the app. The first 30 patients are going into that, with 30 controls subsequent. It's a 6-month observational study. We currently have 6 patients enrolled, and we've got 4 coming next week, so fingers crossed the ball is rolling. And the aim is to roll out to the wider patient group following the pilot. So just to show you what this looks like. So we have a medication tracking schedule. Belimumab is a monthly injection, and the patient can see whether they've had their drug, if they've forgotten, and they can see when the next one is due. When they click on that medication, they can say if they took it, or if they, for any reason, didn't take it, including not being able to, so for example, if they had an infection. Then they are asked to input their tender and swollen joint counts, so they have a body map where they can put in their tender and swollen joints as such. And this is what we see at our end, and if the patient logs in via a desktop computer, they can also look at this. So we can track their DAS over time, and we can see visit by visit what has been done and what's missing from the information, and we can also see whether or not we've changed the drug at all. So the primary objective is really just to show that the app is a reliable monitoring tool. Secondarily, we're going to evaluate patient care compared with standard NHS care. That's what our better control patients do. To evaluate the health economic impact. So, as I mentioned, tapering biologics is an area of interest that we may be able to, because of enhanced monitoring, see if these patients can stretch the intervals between their drugs and see what health economic impact that may have. Similarly, we need to explore whether it changes patients' need to access the outpatient resource if, in fact, patients, because of higher awareness of monitoring, want to come and be seen more often, or whether or not they are able to stretch appointments. There will also be an assessment of the patient satisfaction questionnaire, and we'll assess the app interface and usability by asking the patients that are in the app on to complete a MARS score, which is a validated mobile health assessments tool. Excitingly, we've also integrated BioT into some of our other research studies. So there's a new study called Phosphatop RA that we are going to start in May, and the patients who consent to be a part of this study will also use the BioT app to input their VAS scores, tender and swollen joint counts weekly. It's exciting because we will be able to validate remote DAS monitoring in a research setting, and in addition, tofacitinib is, all of the studies have suggested a very rapid onset of action, so we're hoping that BioT will be able to capture that in real time. I'm not going to talk too much about either of these things, because I know that other people will be, but I've been working with Ali to work on the Bayesian networks and care plans, so we're using data from the Pathobiology of Early Arthritis cohort study, which has about 300 patients with early inflammatory arthritis, and it tracks them over their first year. We have 144 rheumatoid arthritis patients with visits throughout the year, and a huge amount of data, so joint counts, medication changes, background risks, ultrasound and X-ray scores, just to touch on a few. The diagnostic, the Bayesian network is pretty much complete, and the care up for the initial management is in progress. Finally, I've been working with Paul and Hamid on a qualitative study. So we know, we have an idea of the issues for patients, we have an idea of things that people would like, but we need to actually find out if that's true or not. So we'll be discussing with patients via interviews and questionnaires and the use of personas, recruiting patients from the Bart's Arthritis Centre waiting list. Similarly, clinicians using an e-questionnaire and interviews to discuss with them and see if we can make sure that we align needs so that there's a decision support tool that works for everyone. So in summary, the progress, the clinical trial is underway and hopefully moving well to demonstrate validity. Patient and clinician qualitative study to ensure that the eventual product is aligning with the needs of our key stakeholders and working with the Bayesian networks. Future steps is hopefully to get the results of BioT, to hopefully develop a PPI tech group, so patient and public involvement group based on our BioT cohort, and further work on the Bayesian network. Thanks to everyone, especially Fran, who's not here yet, and all of the team.